Hi everyone, and welcome to our webinar. Our webinar is focused on cybersecurity and how to embed cybersecurity in your business and reset defenses. For obvious reasons, it's a time to review and potentially reset our security and cyber defenses, given the current scenarios that we're facing. So today's agenda and introductions are as follows. We're going to be looking at a couple of a poll, I suppose, from that was carried out to understand where accountability lies with cybersecurity. We're going to look at cybersecurity at the board level, and then why the time is right, as I was saying, to reset our concepts and our considerations around cybersecurity. Today we're going to hear from two of our customers as well. Eamon Slevin is the Chief Operating Officer from Octium, and a customer who we are engaged with in helping them address their cybersecurity concerns, policies, technologies, and so forth. And also then from Martina Costello, and Martina is the Information Security Manager at SMBC. So she's a dedicated security role in SMBC, and she'll be telling us about their position on cybersecurity, what's been changing for them, how they view things, and again, SMBC, we're their IT managed services company, and we implement lots of security technologies for SMBC. So we'll be hearing from those customers, and then we'll be talking about, so from what we're seeing, especially over 2020 and looking into 2021, what are the best strategies? What do we need to be considering for the upcoming scenarios that we're going to be facing from here and beyond? Then Johan, who is our head of our security practice, is going to bring us through basically how do we start, where do we begin, and that's going to look at the framework, the CIS controls framework, which is the standard framework that we use. Now, there's lots of frameworks out there, but this is the standard framework that we typically use with customer engagements. And then hopefully we'll have time for some Q&A at the end. So please feel free to put your questions into the comments area on the webinar, and we will get to questions at the end of the webinar. Okay, so moving on, as I said, to the poll. We took a poll to ask, who does the board hold accountable for cybersecurity management? And you can see that it is clearly resting with the C-level staff members on any organization, primarily the CISO. So watch out, Martina. But obviously the CEO, CIO, and CTO significantly responsible in the areas of cybersecurity and management. So I'm sure some of you will hold some of those roles, so be very aware that it's very much considered that you are the person responsible and accountable for cybersecurity and potential risks of cybersecurity. So there's a few cybersecurity questions that the board potentially can ask you. So are we 100% secure? Are you sure? Never going to be 100% secure. Nobody can guarantee that. Do we know what our risks are? So very critical to understand where our risks lie. Are we appropriately allocating resources? Are we spending enough? Why are we spending so much potentially, or something? It's a common question we get. But how did this happen when an incident occurs? I thought you had it under control, CISO, CTO, and so forth. What went wrong, and so forth. So we've got to be prepared to have the answers and the protocols in place to answer those questions and address those scenarios. So why is the time right to reset security? Why is it now? And there's significant reasons for that. Obviously, the global pandemic has played a significant part of its transformed staff engagement. We're working in different ways, and we've had to work in different ways. Our physical offices and access to those have been removed, so that has meant new ways of working, and that has prompted a faster acceleration for digital transformation. So that's been forced upon everybody. We've had to adapt to what this pandemic has caused us in terms of the physical restrictions and so forth. And that means that, you know, people, we've definitely seen it as an IT services provider, people have moved to the cloud in a faster way. So cloud and cybersecurity have become much more important, much more of a priority. It's had to, just because we've had to adapt that way. Because we've had to adapt that way, people have had to, you know, our day, and I'm sure lots of you, your day is consumed with meetings, whether it's Zoom or Teams or whatever technology it is. You're in virtual meetings, virtual collaboration. It's become much more critical, both internal, external, talking to your internal colleagues, and then externally with your customers, suppliers, partner vendors, and so on. So we've had to get much better at that, and that obviously brings along its own considerations around cybersecurity and ensuring we remove risk from that. And obviously then remote and home working has become almost the new norm. I know that phrase is getting bandied about quite a bit, but it is reality, and we are very much having to adapt to that, and we're seeing that with our customers across the board, no exceptions. Everybody has had to change, and security has become a primary consideration. But look, without further ado, I want to introduce our customers and let them give you some real insights into what they're seeing in the environments today, how they're addressing them, and what they consider to be the priorities and primary considerations that we can learn from. So first, I'm going to introduce Eamon Slevin. So Eamon Slevin is from Octium, who are a leading insurance provider. Eamon.
Thanks, Steve. I'll just share my screen there. I hope everybody can see this okay.
Yep.
So I'll just put the presentation on. Excellent. So today I wanted to talk about how to communicate with the board about investment in cybersecurity. I'll talk briefly about our risk management model. The focus is on delivery of the message about cybersecurity and why it's necessary. So it's not really a lesson in risk management. A little bit about Octium Life for context first. We were founded in 2003 by UBS. We were part of the Swiss bank, and we were UBS International Life. In 2017, we were purchased by a private equity group and rebranded Octium Life. We're a organisation that supports customers in the high net worth and ultra high net worth area, and we support these customers and the family offices with their financial planning and succession management. The proposition we sell into Italy, Germany, Greece, UK and Spain, and so as an organisation that's distributed around Europe, we're very much focused, as I said, on a fairly sensitive customer group, and so as part of that then cybersecurity and privacy confidentiality is highly important to our customers. So talking about then the subject matter that we're here for, how to get investment in cybersecurity technology. Firstly, I think it's important to understand that the investment in IT business cases tends to rest outside the IT department. It rests with executive management and ultimately the board, whose knowledge of IT and cybersecurity isn't at the same level as the people writing the business case. So I think it's important that communication and language is set at the right level, and so jargon should be separated, should be avoided, because this is a source of frustration for boards in that they tend to find it difficult to understand the IT messages if there's a lot of sort of technology and jargon in it. And so, you know, as one board member put it to me, we feel like we're ships missing each other in the night. I think also too, it's important that if there's finite capital in an organisation, let's face it, in pretty much every organisation there's always competition between business cases, and so a board will always focus on the case that they understand the most. So if a board has two business cases in front of it, one is investment in new markets or new products versus cybersecurity, it's going to go for the case that's most compelling. And so it's essential then that the communication to the board then is in a way that they understand that, and so it's incumbent then on an IT case to understand what is important to the board so that they can present that case in the best way and in the most compelling way. So in terms of the journey, I think it's important to understand what the board is responsible for, and the board is responsible for strategy, and it needs to understand how IT supports that strategy, and integral to that obviously is data security. Also, then the board is responsible for setting the risk appetite of the organisation, and boards have low, and organisations have low tolerance for regulatory censure, customer detriment, and obviously reputational damage. And supporting your risk appetite then is your documented risk policies, particularly cyber, and also to outsourcing. It's important to understand that the board and indeed the executive management are responsible for what outsourcers do as if they were part of the organisation, and so the cyber threat and the management of the cyber threat stretches into the outsourcing community as well. And then part of it then obviously then is the risk oversight. The whole idea behind risk oversight obviously is for the board to ensure that management is on top of all the risks, and that they're reported, and that risks that can't be mitigated are reported to the board, and there's a conscious decision around whether to accept risk or not to accept risk if it falls outside the appetite. But fundamentally, to the points I'm making at the bottom of this slide, the board must satisfy itself that has sufficiently robust IT management infrastructure, and that there's appropriate level of oversight and challenge. A board's position has to be defensible, and defensible to regulators, defensible to stakeholders, and they must be able to demonstrate risk management. And by that I mean identifying risks, evaluating them, measuring and controlling them, but also there must be demonstrable monitoring and reporting of them. In terms of our journey, one of the key things was the fact base, which was important because not everybody has the same levels of understanding, particularly around cyber risk and the threats that are out there. So education, I think, is key, in presenting of a fact base to get everybody on a common level of understanding as to what the issues are. And so for us, that was a big step in the whole process. And so it was an iterative step. So we communicated with the board and with management who are making decisions, over a period of time, to sort of bring up knowledge before we presented the business case. And also too, it's important to understand what a cybercrime is, and not everybody actually understands that. And I think case studies are crucially important about what's happening in the market. The advancements in technology, I think, are crucially important to understand as well, and Ergo were very helpful to us in terms of understanding not just the technology on the intrusion defense side, but also technologies in terms of the attack side. But also, I think fundamentally, what is the objective? The objective here is prevention and not cure. And sometimes people can get that hard to understand, that if nothing happens, that's success. And I think it's important sort of to get that message across. And it's easy to sort of say, well, you don't want to sort of close the door after the horse is bolted, but actually, how do you put that into a language that the boards understand in the context of cybersecurity? This particular slide here that I have on screen was a key slide in terms of that communication message, and really what we wanted to demonstrate is that you want real-time prevention of cyber risk. So if something happens, you want to respond to it immediately. You don't want to respond to it in retrospect. Also, too, your cybersecurity strategy has to cover your entire IT estate, your owned estate and your outsourced estate. But also, too, it has to be, in addition to being holistic, it has to be outwardly focused. And so it's essential that you get shared threat intelligence, and so there's technology to support that. We use Alien Vault, and we find that in terms of sort of understanding what's happening, not just in financial services, but other markets throughout the universe, that you can actually pull in information and that you can respond and harden your defences before the threats actually come to your own doorstep. The next step, I think, was getting a credible but not excessive standards. And what I mean here is that a risk management and control standards framework has to be proportionate to the threats that your organisation faces. Not so much the size of your organisation, but the threats, and therefore you have to understand the threats. For us, we adopted the Centre for Internet Security CIS controls, and the reason why I liked them was that they were understandable, they were very readable, and we could relate them to our business. And we distilled the CIS into 144 controls. And we applied them across the entire IT estate, including outsource. So these are control standards that we work to, and they're written into our policies. Part of it then is that they roll up into a maturity score, which again is an easy way of communicating with the board. So the community score, the maturity score is a max of 5. We opted for 3.8. Why do we go for 3.8? Well, after consulting with Ergo, consulting with our internal auditors, our external auditors, we figured that 3.8 was a good score to aim for, given the risks that we were exposed to. Anything above that, particularly above 4, the advice that we were getting was that that was military grade, and therefore the costs associated with that were disproportionate to the risks that we were exposed to. So the framework, we adopted the basic foundational and organizational parts of the framework, and again this was appropriate to our organization, again covering the entire estate. And as I say, it's understanding how we could relate that to our risk exposure, our risk appetite, and to not just to the size of our organization, but as I say, and I keep saying, to the risks that you're exposed to. In terms of the next steps was, I think, really the appointment of an ISO and the setting up of an ISO function within the business. And we decided to outsource this on the to Ergo on the basis that one is that the cost is variable on a year-on-year basis, and therefore it's more controllable. But also two, we wanted to, again, going back to the framework, we wanted to be holistic and outwardly focused. We wanted to understand if what risks would be presented to us and what risks we would be facing, and what other industries are facing, what other threats industries are facing, so we could adapt to them before we were attacked. And so essentially an outsourced function for us was extremely helpful, because Ergo service not just other companies in financial services, but also other companies in other industries. The control environment, as I say, must be outwardly and forward looking, so we're not interested in sort of our archaeology as such, and so essentially having the ISO function within the business keeps you focused on that. But fundamentally, from a management perspective, you have that subject matter expertise in-house, you have face-to-face expertise that can face off to outsourcers, and fundamentally what it gave to me, responsible for IT, is confidence and comfort that we had control over the IT environment. Then in intrusion protection, as I mentioned earlier, the technology side of that is crucially important. We have adopted Ergo's MDR, Managed Detection and Response Service, which is 24/7 surveillance on our perimeter. We use Alien Vault in terms of collection and consolidation of what's happening in other industries throughout the world, and that allows us then to respond in terms of our risk management policies, but also to the technology in terms of what we need to do to harden our defences. Fundamental to that is SIEM, security event and incident management, supported by BCP and our disaster recovery. And then the risk management framework, which fundamentally is about, identifying, evaluating, measuring, control, monitoring and reporting risk. And that's why we have our risk management logs, we have our incident logs, and we have our risk accepted logs. And they, as I say, flow up into our policies, and they flow up into our risk appetite statement, and ultimately into our strategy. So it's all consistent. Part of doing all of this is actually having understandable reporting to the board, and what are the key performance indicators that allow the board to understand that cyber security is essentially on top of by the management, and that policies are being adhered to. Another key aspect of it obviously is training. The scourge of phishing has increased now since the pandemic started and since we went into lockdown in March, and so crucial to it is staff understanding when there's a threat there, and refreshing that training. And the ISO function is important in terms of setting the standards for that training. So this was the final slide that we presented to our board, and I'd tell you to note the language. It's there's no jargon, it's simple, but it's basically saying to the board, that our fraud is one of our biggest operational risks that we have to pay attention to. It's something that's on every board agenda, on every management committee agenda. It's cyber fraud is at an industrial scale, and therefore it has to be met with industrial tools to defend yourself. And then in terms of sort of the control framework, framework. It has to be overarching. In other words, it has to cover the entire IT estate, insourced and in particular outsourced. So control standards have to be built into contracts with the outsourcers, and they have to be monitored to that. The definition of success, as I said, is not cure. It's essentially prevention. So if nothing happens, that's good. Finally, the framework that we adopt then is CIS, and that flows into the risk management framework. It doesn't replace it; it's part of it, but it gives you a good roadmap to sort of map your risks into your risk log, into your incident log, into your risk accepted log, and fundamentally you're working within the risk parameters in the risk framework and the risk appetite statement that your board has given. Finally, the ISO function is crucially important, and then understanding that you have to keep your finger on the pulse on what's happening outside the organization. So I think these were key messages. I think the board bought into them, and we got our investment. And so I would say that it was a worthwhile journey. It takes time, and you have to invest the time in sort of communicating with your management, with your board, but also too in pulling together your presentations. It's not something that you can do quickly. You have to do it over a period of time, and it's an iterative process. And so that's it for me. Thanks for listening.
That's great, Eamon. Very much appreciated, and some great insights. Things like that clear, jargon-free communications to the board. Yeah, absolutely critical. Nobody wants to hear bunches of three-letter acronyms and loads of jargon. Cybersecurity jargon can be quite confusing as well. So making sure we get that clear concept to the board of why we need to invest and what it looks like. And as you said, success could mean nothing's happening, which is great. You're preventing attacks rather than reacting and recovering. So I think that's a key one. Absolutely. Another one you mentioned, Eamon, was education, cybersecurity awareness, getting that training and awareness there within the organization. Critical too. And you guys are doing, you guys are taking the steps, and you're implementing these protocols around awareness, educating the board, getting the investment, and so forth. And assigning an information security officer. Okay, it's an outsourced model to us, and not all organizations can afford a full-time information security officer dedicated to it. But at least you have addressed the concern and put a focus on it in the right area. So some really good points.
Yeah, and evidencing externally to stakeholders, regulators and shareholders that in fact we're on top of the risks, and the board is comfortable with that. The board's position is ultimately it has to evidence and demonstrably evidence that it's on top of the risks.
Yeah, and that's the other thing I got from what you were saying was you made it credible, not excessive. So it's realistic security measures that are deliverable and affordable, that the business can sign up to.
Exactly, proportionate. Yeah.
Really good. Thanks very much, Eamon.
Thank you.
So we're going to move on to Martina Costello. As I said, Martina Costello is the information security manager from another customer organization from Ergo. It's SMBC Aviation Capital. So Martina.
Okay, everybody, just share my screen now. There we go. And actually, I might just turn off my camera. Hi, everyone. I'll say hello before I turn my camera off, just in case I have any network issues, so you at least be able to hear my voice.
All good.
Okay, so today, thanks very much for the opportunity, and delighted to be able to talk to people from the isolation of my living room. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about cybersecurity in SMBC Aviation Capital, and take a look at our strategy. Talking to the board, Eamon has covered a lot of that already, and a little bit of word about our partnership with Ergo. Hang on, that screen has frozen. That's wonderful. Okay, there we go. So you might not have heard of us, so I thought I would just give you a quick little rundown. SMBC Aviation Capital is one of the world's leading aircraft leasing companies. We are based in Dublin. We manage, we own or manage 710 plus aircraft. That is about $11.1 billion in assets. And in the last financial year, our turnover was $1.2 billion. We have 100+ airline customers, over 80 investors, and 200 employees across 8 global offices. We are owned by a consortium of companies in the Japanese Sumitomo Group. So SMBC has more than 400 years of history in Japan and is now one of the largest banks in Japan. And prior to the pandemic, in normal times, every minute of every day, one of SMBC Aviation Capital's aircraft was taking off or landing somewhere around the world. Apologies, my...
The joys of live presentation, Martina.
It just refuses to go down until I try 3 times.
Right.
So let me tell you a little bit about cybersecurity in Aviation Capital. We are on a journey from standing up our own infrastructure in 2015 with no pre-existing IT function, and we're transitioning from on-premise to cloud first. But we're some way away from being all on the cloud, and we'll have hybrid arrangements for the near term at least. Our cybersecurity framework has evolved along the way, as has our strategy, and we're now revisiting that. But we do make good use of frameworks. They complement our standards, repeatable processes, they're good for measuring against, etc. Working from home was challenging initially for us, but we were already in a place where we have a highly mobile, globally based and traveling workforce. And we were about to embark on a Microsoft Teams rollout, which we had planned, and also a single device strategy for office and remote working. And this obviously then was accelerated in March. One thing that hasn't changed for our industry is the preponderance of email usage across the aircraft leasing industry. So it should come as no surprise that when I started the function first, and I was prioritizing my activities, I would have placed great emphasis on end user awareness and engagement. And, you know, from attending of webinars, as we all do these days, it would seem that we have come full circle back to that. And there's an increasing focus now on users and user behavior. But we also have a very strong focus on getting and keeping the basics right. Basics, basics, basics. They might be boring, but the more you repeat and get it right, the stronger your defenses are and across your overall attack surface. And to the point of a reset, as Steve was saying, changes in thinking now as we move towards the cloud about trust being granted by virtue of being on a network towards a zero trust model. Well, we're still looking at maintaining a strong level of control and assurance as we move to the cloud, and we're challenging ourselves to understand cloud controls versus on-premise controls, you know, and the kind of the same but different aspects of those. So just a few thoughts on strategy from myself. I would say, first of all, pick a framework, or rather design, adopt or adapt a framework. There's no doubt there are lots available, and arguably it doesn't make a huge difference what you pick, as long as it's something that's suitable for your requirements. You know, the common and well-used ones, such as the ISO 27000 series, the NIST frameworks, the CIS controls, the Cloud Security Alliance matrix, they all have their uses, but there is no one size fits all. So we find that a combination of 27000 CIS and the CCM suits us, and lots of people are now choosing to align with NIST as well. So I think my advice would be that consult the models. I would recommend using one or two of the more widely used ones and understood ones, as you should be able to benchmark against them. But having a framework is important. It helps keep you on track. You'll be able to perform gap analysis. It'll aid benchmarking. And it'll also help you to demonstrate progress, and as well as that, keep areas for improvement uppermost in your mind. And definitely don't start with the technology. What is your business strategy? Where is your business going? What tools will your people need? Working from home has become a given for many. It's a de facto strategy, if you like. But where will your critical assets need to be created, accessed, updated, shared in the future? And along with that, it's very important that you identify the risks to your business and frame your program objectives to address these. Then you can choose the tactics which will address the objectives and see how that equates back to your strategy. But remember, we are doing security with the business, not to the business. And I think there will be very few organizations who are not on some sort of a journey to cloud usage at this stage. So I'd say look at what you're doing well. How will that need to change in the new world? For instance, your developers might be very good at what they know, but can they adapt to containerization, microservices, cloud PaaS environments where they potentially have more free reign than on-premise? Are you comfortable with that? Will you have to get comfortable with software capabilities replacing your hard and crunchy appliances? Personally, I advocate exploiting native cloud capabilities from your cloud services first and then see what you're missing. There's no doubt there's a quite bewildering range of tools on offer, and vendor takeovers are happening all the time as they rush to complete their suite or package something that they see as a more complete offering. So I would say definitely focus on the native capabilities first and then see where you need to augment with other technologies. And I would also say challenge the way you've done things. You know, remember, trust based on the traditional perimeter is a paradigm we are moving away from. And in the new world, trust isn't granted implicitly. It is going to need to be earned and continuously evaluated. But remember, human error or inaction are still the most likely causes of issues and breaches. So I would say don't forget the basics. The adage of defense in depth is never more true now that data is moving beyond your data center perimeters. And when it comes to defense in depth, I would also say there's no doubt that people should always be a key pillar of your strategy as a result. So just moving on then, just talking about board engagement, and my engagement would be with the ExCo and C-suite, and because of the size of our company, that would be quite regular in informal engagements as well. So I suppose my advice would be to make sure if you're reporting or presenting, make sure it's not the first time they'll have seen or heard of your strategy. And also remember that every executive and C-level or board member is a user and consumer of your IT systems and your security messages as well. What I did was I started by a very simple, what do we mean by cyber, to try and demystify this and to make sure that we had common understanding, as Eamon was saying, taking out the jargon, talking in business terms, relating it to common things that we could both agree that, yes, we know what we're talking about here. And then we picked 3 things to focus on initially. I would also say it is very, very good to make good use of baselines and benchmarks. We align our standards to 27002. We've made good usage of the Cloud Security Alliance Consensus Assessment Initiative questionnaire. That's quite a mouthful, the cake, when we're essentially assessing potential suppliers or SaaS services. And we've also benchmarked ourselves against the CIS top 20 controls following repeated threat assessments, which looked at generic and industry specific threats. And these last 2 boil down into that, informing the 3 items I mentioned in the first point that we started to concentrate on with the board. We've also taken the approach to design, architect and implement to our standards the CIS baselines before we put the workloads in the cloud. So avoiding going ahead and adopting cloud and then thinking afterwards about the security. Then we also get these independently reviewed and tested, and that has enabled us to demonstrate confidence, you know, and answer questions from the directors when they say, well, how can you tell me my data is secure? Also, as Eamon was saying, a typical output of good cybersecurity is the absence of a failure, which can be hard to measure and hard to gain budget for. So my advice would be to translate risks into the business impact to your business and then show how elements of your strategy can address these. And also prepare yourself for reassurance. Your C-level executives are probably having the fear of God put into them by the media. Panic and fear are not good tools to gain support, however. Particularly if you're a regulated entity, there might be a board member who is more familiar or clued into cyber, and that should be somebody that you could run your strategy by in advance of any board presentation. Also, the UK's National Cybersecurity Centre has a very good toolkit for board members on cyber, so you could start with that, and you could maybe cover particular elements over a number of reports or presentations. Other things which are good are facilitated simulated cyber incident exercises, incident response exercises. And finally, as I say, I've always emphasised the human element, and it is being recognised increasingly now. But I would say you need to mean it, you know, and demonstrate that the human element really is key, and is a pillar of your strategy. And I would also advise showing examples, celebrating good behavior, framing your language, you know, less near miss and more great catch, I think would be good. I'm just going to, my final slide then is just on a little bit about our partnership with Ergo. So Ergo is our managed service provider for our core infrastructure for both our on-premise and our cloud. And information security, myself, in Aviation Capital has a very close relationship with the Ergo service delivery managers and the engineers. I would say that Ergo help us both to design and implement and operate our controls. And going back to the paying attention to basics being so important, we have a mutual understanding that maintaining a good security posture benefits both parties. We also have harnessed some of the deep expertise in particular areas, particularly in relation to 365, but other projects as well. So in particular, accelerating our Teams rollout, which they had been working with us previously in March anyway, and also on a data security and governance project as we move to harness more of 365 and the tool set expansion there. So that is it from me, and apologies for having to do that while I had my camera turned off. I'll turn it back on now. I hope you could hear me along the way.
Yeah, it was very clear. I didn't have any issues anyway, Martina. I thought that was very good, and hopefully everybody else found that useful too. It was interesting to see the common themes. You know, it's a journey. Unfortunately, there isn't an instant switch that we could just turn on and be secure. It is a journey. There's a lot to prepare for. And again, the end user awareness piece, Martina, was coming through very clear. You know, people are key. Remove the jargon. You know, use business technology to get people to understand, you know, why and how and so forth. But educate them too as to the particular risks that are potentially out there. The other point I think you mentioned a couple of times was that, you know, we are now moving to a zero trust model. We've replaced that perimeter trust scenario where we now have to treat everything as if it's potentially compromised, and we do not trust it. We have a zero trust model. Absolutely, that's just the foundational concept that we have to implement now with cloud services and the modern way of working. I think something else you were saying was understanding and contrasting the differences between on-prem and cloud security considerations. So that is, you know, that cloud, that zero trust model definitely highlights that. Aligning with your business and your business strategy. You know, don't use panic and fear. Again, you know, good points. We've got to educate people so that they are consciously aware, not just in fear or ignorant of the potential risks and dangers. And we see that very clearly. You know, that there used to be, I think, a concept in security teams of trying to imbue, you know, dread and fear about God, the things that could happen. But you're right, it's definitely not the right way to go. We want to educate people and make them very much more aware.
It won't get us anywhere. As I was saying,
no.
we need to be doing security with the business, not to the business.
Yeah, exactly. But then, and the other point I just noted you picked up on was the importance of the baselining and benchmarks, and they're true. You know, Eamon was saying the same, and you're saying the same. We've got a framework. It gives us the ability to put a framework in place to see where the baselines are and where we need to focus the priorities and improvements and so forth. So yeah, absolutely. Really good. Appreciate that. Thanks very much, Martina. I enjoyed that. I hope everybody else did too. So I'm going to move on to Johan. Johan, who's basically our head of cyber security and our head of our security practice. So Johan Smith is going to talk to us about what are the strategies for now and into 2021 and beyond. Johan?
Hi, Steve. Thank you. Thanks, Eamon and Martina. Really enjoyed that. Thanks for that summary. That really well put. Shows the journey as such an important thing, and the strategy and the communication piece, and allowing us to move through that. So from my side, what we saw as a team, 2020 was quite a busy year. Multiple cybersecurity requests came in. These sort of 4 focus areas stood out for us. What we sort of have to consider for 2021 going forward. We can see organizations going to expand on these. They're going to have these focused views. These 4 areas where there's sort of a recurring theme for us throughout the year. Secure working. That came about, sort of became a priority ask. We assisted and gave security guidance on that and advised sort of how to advise your staff. We helped sort of assisted Octium in this. 2021, we're going to see the continuation of that, securing that remote work. It will be a key focus area and a continuation of that. Closing on securing your critical data, for example, SMBC, when we assisted in this effort, we plan with you in securing your data. We move from that enterprise data management strategy, governance to implementation. That data key is key and vital to your organization, and you need to secure it and understand how to secure it and know what it is that you have, and then move forward. Cloud securing the cloud sort of model became a principal ask. 2021, this will develop further. We see that the rate of cloud adoption and securing those workloads in various sort of tasks and items that you consume in cloud, that's going to be a very key sort of area to look at and how to place those controls, as Martina also rightly put it, is choose that framework that sits around what it is that is your strategy and work with the business strategy and not try and work from a technology first sort of approach. Lastly, focusing on security advisory services. So advising clients on an ongoing basis. We help you address and show you what the exposures are. What is that key focus? As Eamon also put it, we can bring in different various sectors and industry-based approaches as well. So we don't just align to a specific vertical and then help you take that next step in the journey. You can choose between a full-time and a shared model in terms of your advisory service, and we are here, so we can definitely recommend and how to build out that competency for you and your board through the team that we've got from my side. Then moving on, where does the journey begin? If we look at that, the state that you have, how do you protect that? So how do you see what is it that needs to have that level of protection that you very comfortable with in terms of your journey? The layered controls approach. So defense and dev, Martina mentioned that for your organization. How do you move to block or at least contain that threat actor? And then how do you see that event data? Do you detect it in your organization? We recommend a sort of a managed SIEM approach or a full MDR. Again, today it is critical to not just let your event data be protected by single points of control and reporting, so give you that single point of view through a SIEM or a full MDR in terms of response. Then your incident response plan. How do you move to protect and how do you ready your organization for this? So your organization can't just be reactive anymore. You have to have that incident response plan ready and able to execute. And again, also as Martina mentioned, is test, go through your plans, test it and find out where there's gaps and then address those. Final pictures to build in the cadence and reevaluate. So where's your position? What is it? Accept those quick changes, be agile as well. So improve your ongoing challenge in cybersecurity and help your organization to move forward. Then the CIS controls, we saw a brief slide there from Eamon, thank you. This is recognized as an effective best practice control framework. We work with our clients like Octium, for example, in performing that gap analysis. We have a deep understanding of these control. So the 20 sub controls and the 20 controls and the associative sub controls, the cybersecurity maturity view that then comes out of this in the terms of the framework with the gap assessment. We help you to build that message to the leadership and the team or your board. And then the final piece is the maturity rating. As Eamon also pointed out, you set that with the risks that you accept and what is that maturity rating that you would like to achieve. And then we assist in building your presentation, how to take that CIS control assessment and map it to your future governance frameworks. So if you're looking then to blend your frameworks and with NIST, CSF or ISO 27K as part of that long-term cybersecurity journey for the organization, this is where we would come in as advisory and then assist your organization. Moving on, we thank you for being part of this. We'd like you to look at a quick quiz. One lucky customer will win an Evoco Vamper from us. It's a very simple question. So on the CIS controls, you can name one of the basic ones and email your answer to cybersecurity@ergogroup.ie. Thank you. Appreciate the time that you're spending with us.
Thanks, Johan. Okay. So in the background, we've had hopefully some questions submitted. I know we had some questions sent in ahead of the webinar today. So I'd like to take a few minutes just to go through some of those and see how we can potentially address some of the queries that we're getting. Let me see now if I can move this on. Okay, so how do you meet the business needs for continual timely deployment of new features in your custom software applications with the audit, security, and compliance requirements of the company? That wasn't a short question, was it?
No, not at all.
So
I'll take this one. So definitely the one thing that you have to understand, and I assume this is more from a developer sort of point of view of the way the question is phrased. Your security must be embedded in your design process. So from the initial concept, secure design or secure design principles need to be communicated. You need to understand how to use it through all of your projects and what is those controls that you want to play or have in play with your software development that you do. So secure software design is really key today. You don't want to expose any vulnerabilities through your designing process or your development process, whether this is in a full sort of software development cycle or whether you're just consuming. So are you just using parts of your cloud available tools and delivering a service for the organization? So for me, it's definitely having that golden thread of security by design from inception to completion.
Right. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, and I'd maybe just. Oh,
yeah.
sorry.
Yeah, no,
I was just going to ask
that.
So I would have placed kind of great store on risk assessment and looking at business impact of things with the business, and then looking at threats and the vulnerabilities and getting the developers involved in that. But what we've done recently as well is our developers themselves have done threat modeling training. So now it kind of, it's a little bit more in their hands to be looking at things technically and looking at trust boundaries and that, which I've hoping the both of those will come in useful.
How have they taken to that, Martina? Have they taken it to it easily, or has it been a struggle?
No, it depends.
Right.
Some people are, some people are more. But what I think it does is it puts rather than me coming along with a business impact assessment workshop first. Right. It allows them to talk among themselves, and it's a more kind of a peer activity initially with security involved in it. So I think it's good that they're leading it more.
So it becomes secure by design from initiative.
Yeah, but also too, then from a management perspective, then like you can go fast and you can go safe, because if you understand your risk framework, you know where the boundaries are and you can operate to those risk boundaries. And then if there's residual risk, having put in controls or having sort of done a development that doesn't cater for all the risks, you then know when to report and how to report. Once there's transparency up the line, then essentially then it's it's the management and ultimately the board's decision as to whether to accept or reject risk. So in fact, actually, if you have a well-documented risk management framework that people understand, and it does take time to understand it, then you know when to report and when not to report, and what risks you can take and what risks you need not take or you're not allowed to take. So in fact, actually, it can be pro-business, and actually that's when the risk management framework is actually supporting the business, you know, so you can actually move quite fast then.
Absolutely. All right. Thanks for that, guys.
Thank you.
The next query we had was, what cybersecurity expertise should we have in-house and what should we outsource? Pretty good one.
Yeah. Well, I'll start on this one because we decided to outsource for the reasons I stated in the presentation. Like, you know, we're in terms of headcount, we're a relatively small organisation, but with a 4 billion balance sheet and with the type of customers that we serve, you know, security is one of the big issues for our board. And so, what we wanted to do was to understand what's happening in the industry, what's happening, not just financial services, but other industries. And so for us, an outsource function was a logical approach in terms of, you know, one is that the cost is variable and it's manageable on a year-to-year basis, but also two, we felt that you could get better knowledge from what was happening around the place as opposed to somebody who's in-house and sort of specialising only in our own organisation and our own partners. We get that more holistic view of what was happening outside. But equally, I suppose somebody could say that the in-house model works as well if ISOs then keep themselves informed as to what's happening in the industry. But again, you'll always need sort of a route into what's happening in other industries through, you know, organisations, partners like auditors, advisors, the likes of Ergo, etc.
Yeah, I mean, look, we're involved in both models. Like with Octium, we're obviously an outsourced ISO, the information security officer, but with SMBC, you know, they have Martina's expertise in-house, and we supplement potentially with technology, security, information, so on. So it's obviously a different model you guys have taken, Martina.
Yeah, it is, and I suppose if I looking at that question, I think probably what you can't outsource is it's kind of back to the business impact as well, and the understanding of how your business runs and works. But certainly what you will not have in-house is deep technical knowledge of everything. And certainly, as Eamon says, you know, you are going to need external awareness of threats and trends and things like that. So yeah, it's a bit like picking the framework. You know, there are things that will suit you, and if it's taken the time to actually look at that. It depends on the sort of organisation.
Yeah, absolutely, and the business model. So yeah, thanks for that, guys. I'll move on to the next one, which is what's one of the biggest cybersecurity challenges business face in a hybrid remote world? Yeah, it's a good one. Significant. Johan, do you want to take that?
Yeah, I think so. The first one we definitely see is the human factor is still the biggest risk. You need to understand how to train. We see with the security awareness training pieces, the sort of in the leadership quadrant, all of that is focused around the human factor. Your next one is your identity store, identity and access. How do you protect identities? Again, in the remote working scenario that we're sitting in today, very critical to understand how to protect that identity. They are moving, they are roaming. And then the security awareness training. So you don't just want a flat piece of, here's a slide deck, can you please consume this and we'll come back to you next year. It has to be continuous. It has to, as Martina also mentioned earlier, it has to be basic, start and allow a frequency and a cadence with your staff and sort of help the staff complement in understanding what is cyber, what is that threat, and then continuously assess and test against that.
It's very much the theme that came through as well from both Martina and Eamon. You know, that human factor, that need for awareness within the organization to get the users to understand potential threats, how they protect themselves against those threats.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, very much so. It's a human thing. People, it's a people business, and so
Absolutely.
you know, it's interesting. Even sort of the Data Protection Commissioner is calling it out that any sort of issues and fines that that are coming from her office are around breaches caused by human error.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's the old saying, isn't it, that your users, your staff, are your first firewall, and probably the most important firewall you have, because
definitely.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and it's not
Just
necessarily malicious. It's potentially just unawareness, you know, lack of awareness around threats.
And I've made a point of telling our people for the past, since I started in the job, I regard you as our strongest link, because you are both the first and the final line of defense as far as I'm concerned. I think the biggest cyber security challenges in the hybrid remote world is just that hybrid bit. It's the blend between work and personal, you know, the mistakes, the expediency, using the wrong device for the wrong thing. It's just that, really, to be honest. And obviously, of course, the huge increase in phishing, etc.
Yeah.
As part.
Yep, it's a big one. Phishing, God, the rate of phishing attacks is exponential. Also, I've seen we've noticed. So we're a primary checkpoint partner, and we noticed last week in our scanning that there were botnets out there deliberately targeted at checkpoint and checkpoint firewalls and services, which we were keeping an eye on, because we got the 24/7 knock and sock services. But then I was only reading yesterday that Sophos, another security-focused vendor who deliver firewalls and endpoint management, encryption, you know, malware protection, so on, they suffered their own breach last week. So very much, even the experts in the industry, you know, need to be on their toes and maintaining the awareness throughout the organization. So I suppose, which just brings me to peek at the next question, which was, sorry, I've just been told we're running out of time, so I won't be able to get to the next question. So the other, thanks for attending the webinar today. I hope we do get some submissions on that question to win that hamper. Plus, we've also got a full day of InfoSec consultancy on the CIS controls. You've heard us talk about the CIS controls a few times today. Hopefully we didn't bore you too much about the CIS controls, but they are a very useful framework which we implement, and we want to give somebody a full day's consultancy on those CIS controls. And all you need to do is fill out the feedback form for a chance to win that full day consultancy. And again, please give us an email back the response on that question, which was around the CIS controls, to win that hamper. But otherwise, I want to extend my thanks to Martina and Eamon, who are our customers, for attending today and sharing their experiences and knowledge. Thank you guys very, very much for that. It's most useful. Thanks to Johan, and thank you all for attending the webinar today. And hopefully we'll see you at future ones. Thanks very much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.